Om Namo Arihantanam. Om Namo Siddhanam. Om Namo Ayariyanam. Om Namo Uvajjayanam. Om Namo Lo Esabvasahunam. Eso Panchanamukaro. Sabbapavapanasano. Mangalanam cha Sabbeshim. Padmam Havai Mangalam. Arhanto Bhagavanta Indra Mahita. Siddhascha Siddhi Sthita. Acharya Jina Shasano Natikara. Pujya Upadhyayaka. Trisiddhanta Supathika Munivara. Ratnatraya Radhika. Panchaite Parameshtinah Pratidinam. Kurvantu vo Mangalam. Kurvantu vo Mangalam. Oshwal Association of the UK તરફથી આપ સૌને પ્રણામ. આપ સર્વનું આરોગ્ય સુખાકારી સારી રહે અને ખૂબ સારા કાર્ય કરવાની શક્તિ દેવ ગુરુ અને ધર્મ પસાએ પ્રાપ્ત થાય એ જ પરમાત્માના ચરણમાં વંદના અને પ્રાર્થના.
Pranam, Jai Jinanda. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our second Oshwal Wellbeing and Lifestyle webinar. Today, our welcome will be done by Nilesh Bhai Shah, the President of Oshwal Association of the UK.
Jai Jinendra and Pranam Badane. On behalf of Oshwal Association of UK, a very warm welcome to all of you to watch the series of Oshwal Wellbeing and Lifestyle webinars. I hope you are all safe and keeping well. This is our second webinar on health series since we launched a few weeks ago. Today, we are very fortunate to have our professional health experts who will talk on transplant challenges and the work of NHSBT by Millie Banarjee, and also on organ retrieval process and current challenges by Bimbi Fernando, who is an organ transplant consultant surgeon. Hopefully, we will all learn something new today from their talks and the expert advice they would be offering us so that we can talk this and take this advice and also pass on this knowledge which we have today listened to our friends and families. For the past year, OAUK have been in talks with NHS on organ donations and blood and transplant and how we can make aware to our members the importance of the organ donation. And obviously the new law has come into existence which will affect each and every one of us. We have already talked about on its various events of ours in the past year, and also the articles were also put on our website. So without further ado, let us now move on to the talks. Thank you for listening. Over to you, Prafula Ben.
Thank you so much for that lovely warm welcome, Nilesh Bhai, and warm welcome to all our guests and audiences who are joining us via YouTube. I'd like to move to our first guest today, who is the wonderful Millie Banarjee, joining us, chairman of NHS Blood and Transplant, and joining us from her very, very busy schedule. So welcome, Millie, to today's webinar. This webinar is all about organ donation and how do we raise awareness in our community and encourage more people to sign the organ donation register and become organ donors. So welcome to our second webinar, Millie, and looking forward to hearing what you've got to say about the work and the fantastic work actually the NHS Blood and Transplant currently doing in terms of the 2 campaigns that we have recently heard about and worked through. So Leave Them Certain, and of course yesterday the new campaign that was launched, Heart to Heart. So over to you, Millie.
Thank you, and namaste and good evening. I'm very honored to be here, and thank you for asking me. You are a very important partner, and I'll come back to that in a minute. Let me start by giving you a little bit of an update on organ donation. We've had a tough year, as most of you know, and we've got some clinicians on the webinar, and they will know more than anybody else how difficult it's been because of the COVID situation and because of the way the hospitals have had to react to the immediate COVID-related requirements. So we end the year with 4,160 people still on the donation waiting list. However, in the last year, in spite of COVID, we've achieved 2,832 transplants, which is really quite remarkable. And we worked very hard all across the NHS, the transplant surgeons, the hospital authorities, ourselves, and most importantly, our very kind and generous donors and their family to achieve that many transplants. But there's no doubt that, you know, had we not been in the situation we've been in, we could have done better. Of the 4,166, more than half, 2,570 people are waiting for kidney transplantation. And I mention that particularly, colleagues, because a very unacceptably high proportion of that are in our own communities. 580 of that 2,569 are from our communities. So we have a challenge ahead of us, and what has already been mentioned are the 2 campaigns. But before I mention the campaigns again, let me just say a few words about NHS Blood and Transplant. I've just had a board meeting today. We just had a long day of board meeting. And we actually did a live broadcast. It was broadcast on the webinar. And if you listen to it and watch it, you will find that working with the Asian and Black communities for donation, blood and transplantation came up again and again. We remain very, very committed, both strategically and operationally, to improve that situation. We've written our strategy for the next period of time, and that is being finalized as I speak. And when it is published, you will see again our full-hearted commitment to continue to work with the communities to improve their experience of getting more transplants. Donation is one side of it, and then transplantation capability is another. And I assure you, we're working on both. We are investing in this challenge, both above the line in the normal sort of marketing campaigns. And again, you'll see them, and it's been mentioned. So the 2 particular campaigns that are running is an absolute heartrending video on Leave Them Certain. And some of you were with us when we launched it a few weeks ago, and also the Heart to Heart. We will continue to do this. We will continue to target specific communities in order to both create their understanding of donation and to increase our donation attitudes. One of the things that we continue to do is to survey and we track attitudes. I heard somebody mention some survey you've done, but those of you who work closely with us, you will know that we continually track attitudinal responses. And I had a look at them day before yesterday, I think, because waiting for this evening's event. And attitudes are becoming more positive, and we are succeeding. It's been slow, and it is going to be slow because it's a difficult topic. But actually, for instance, people who will donate, who say they will donate from our communities, has gone from 11% to 15%. So we will continue to strive with your help. The other thing we're doing, and we've been doing this for a few years, and we've kind of upped our investment in that with the very generous help from central government in community projects. And we work with communities, we invest in these communities so that the communities can help us to change attitudes, increase awareness, so that we can actually end up with more donors, which save more lives. These projects that are running now, we have 35 projects that we want to run, and we are going through the process of firming up on those, and I'm sure some of you have been involved in that. Let me finish by just a few more words on our request. It's an extraordinarily sensitive thing to ask people to donate. So in spite of the change of the law, we know that the real decisions are made at the time of donation, at the time of the decision. And I can give you my absolute personal assurance that all our people, our nurses, our specialist nurses, our clinicians, the clinicians we work with, the hospital, are fully trained and equipped to make sure that we remain as sensitive as we can to the families, to their requirements, to their faith requirements, so that we don't assume or presume that this is a gift that is just, there's a right to organs, in spite of what the law says. So we will continue to be sensitive, we will continue to work with families, and any conversations you have, you can help us by giving that assurance on our behalf. Because, and if you need any more information on that, come back to our teams and we will make sure that you understand our processes. So we're not presuming because of the law. All we are doing is making sure that with the law behind us, we continue to work closely with the families and also with the community. So thank you very much, colleagues, for letting me speak to you this evening.
Thank you so much, Millie. Wonderful. And thank you for bringing us all up to date with everything that's been happening in this very challenging year for transplants and for organ donation. I mean, you mentioned some amazing figures there, 2,832 transplants, despite the challenges. So our thanks goes out to everyone that's been involved in that work, absolutely. But that other horrendous figure about the number of people waiting for transplants. So that indeed is the challenge for all of us, and something that we need to do something about. So thank you very much, Millie, for joining us. You're of course staying for the Q&A at the end of this session. And all our audience, if you have any questions for Millie and the other speakers here, please do put them in the comment section on YouTube, and we will attempt to get to as many as possible at the end of this session. I'd now like to introduce our first organ donation story, and it's a story that is incredible in terms of resilience and courage. We've got Pragna Mehta here to talk about her son Karan, who passed away but left an amazing legacy behind by donating his organs. Pragna Ben.
Thank you, Prafula. Good question, everyone. Good evening. I will try my hardest in relaying my son Karan's brave decision in organ donation. For any person to lose their dearest and loved ones, it's never easy. But having lost my son Karan at a tender age of 19 years in a car accident, sadly, some things in life we just cannot control. And things do not work out the way one would like or expect. And for me, I'm learning the hardest way. Karan truly was my world and he was my everything. His unexpected departure has now left the biggest void in my life. Not a single word in any language can describe how we are feeling as a family and friends. There truly are no words, and the loss of Karan is too great. His beautiful soul, full of life, that would constantly bounce from place to place, only to give love and respect to all he met. Karan truly was a people magnet. He touched and had an impact on everyone he met, regardless of his age, race, or creed. Karan is I'm ever so sorry. Karan is unforgettable and meant so much to all he met and had the pleasure of knowing him. This was evident in the diversity of the 1,400 people that attended his prayers and the 600 people that attended his funeral. This in itself tells you what an amazing young man he was and what he meant to the people that knew him. Karan's special ability to communicate was second to none, and this clearly showed and continues to do so as he still remains very much in everyone's thoughts and prayers. Whilst I struggle with the reality, Karan's independent decision at a young age of 16 to become an organ donor gives some solace in the fact that he gave the precious gift of life to 4 families. This selfless act did not surprise me, as I believe Karan is a beautiful soul and spiritually connected on a different level. He was able to gift both his kidneys to people aged 40 and 50, part of his liver to a young boy, and his golden precious heart to a young man in his 20s. This was simply remarkable. And knowing my son, he would have great comfort in the fact that we fulfilled his wishes in enabling others and helping others in his passing. When he made his decision at the age of 16, we had a few conversations in regards to organ donation and the fact that I had actually asked him to cancel because I thought he was too young to make such a big decision in his life. But he was adamant, and he said to me, "Mum, you've always told me that when we pass, our soul moves on and our bodies are just our carriers. So why would I need anything when I pass?" Little did we know, it was only a month after that I would be faced in making a decision. And the reality came true that I would have to decide whether I want to fulfill his wishes, knowing that he was so adamant and so felt so strongly about how he would want to help others. At the hardest time in my life, I made that decision to fulfill his wishes and carry on with the organ donation. We had, as a family, we had the best support from all the medical staff, all the medical team, the organ donating team. They were amazing. They guided us through every step because clearly, you know, at a time like this, you still wonder whether you're doing the right thing. And I knew I was, because it's what he wanted. And it's a discussion we had at length. The team were amazing. They allowed me to, and my family, all the time that we needed to be with him before his organ operations. Before and after his operation, I was allowed to wash and bathe him, just as I did when he was born. They gave us full support. They allowed me to go and see him at the Chapel of Rest and my family every day until his funeral, which all I could see was a peaceful face. He looked so peaceful as he lay there. Current's gift has helped 4 families, which I now know because I've just had an update on the families that they're doing amazingly well. And there's nothing better to hear than that the gift that my son gave to these families, that they are all doing wonderfully well, and it gives them a second lease of life. Even though I so miss him. Oh, I'm so sorry. The important thing out of all this, I would just like to stress how important it is that we as families and friends, we discuss this. We let people know that this is our choice. This is what we want to do. We want to organ donate. We want to help others in our passing. Because for me, as much as I have the pain and hurt in the loss of my son, I know I did right by him in fulfilling his wishes and helping others, because there's nothing more than that he would want now. So, you know, it's a big request from myself. Open up with families, talk to your little ones. They're never too young to discuss such conversations. You can open up a conversation regarding this. When Karen was born, he was premature. He was 2 months prem. And at that time, while Karen was incubated, he was given blood twice. And then after discharge, he needed blood again. We were forever grateful to those donors that donated the blood for my son to have been here for the 19 years that I had him for. Because without those donors, I wouldn't have had the 19 years that I had with my son. And now, as much as the pain of missing him and the void that will never ever be filled in my life, it gives me solace in knowing that he helped others, and it was a wish that he wanted to do. He truly was an amazing child who respected all cultures. He took it upon himself to learn all the religions, be it Christianity, Islam, Sikhism, Hinduism, which was his birth religion. And he respected every single religion. And for that, he was an amazing child. And all I stress is, like I said before, please just discuss this with your loved ones, talk with your loved ones, and let them know that in your passing, because in life, if there's ever anything truer than the fact that sadly one day we all will depart from this world and we all will leave, because we are here. And the day we do leave the message with your loved ones in what your wishes are, because that truly, truly, truly will make a lot of difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Pragnaben, for that incredible story of the gifts that Karan gave when he departed, and the difference that has made to so many people, and particularly those 4 families. And absolutely, I think everyone should have that conversation that makes deciding easier. Thank you so much for sharing that story. And I'm getting quite a lot of messages from people who are so touched by it. So thank you for joining us, and do please stay for the Q&A, because I think you're going to get quite a lot of questions from people. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Prafula.
Right, we're going to now go to our next speaker, who is Mr. Bimbi Fernando, liver and kidney transplant consultant surgeon from Royal Free Hospital. Welcome, Bimbi, to today's webinar. And yeah, I think you're going to give us a presentation about the challenges that you face, and particularly the impacts of the last year, and what can we do better in the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prafula, and I would also like to give some special thanks to Pragnaben for sharing that very, very powerful story of her personal view of transplantation. Very, very powerful, and very, very grateful for you sharing that with us today. And certainly Karan seems and sounds like an absolutely wonderful person, and I'm sure everyone has been touched by hearing what you had to say. So thank you very much for sharing that story. So my name is Bimbi Fernando. I'm a consultant transplant surgeon at the Royal Free Hospital, and I just really wanted to share some different aspects of what we face in transplant surgery, as well as with respect to organ donation. So I just turn it around and just really just talk about the public first of all, in terms of what the public sort of think and believe and how they behave. And I just want to share a story from Brazil. So this is one of Brazil's richest and most powerful men. His name is Chiquinho Scarpa. And he's a little bit of an eccentric, as you can see. He was well known for driving around in this Bentley that he'd invested a lot of money in. And because he's rich and powerful, he started having some slightly odd ideas, and he became besotted by the ancient Egyptians and learned that they were buried with their precious goods. So he then announced that he would dig a hole and want to be buried with his Bentley so that he could drive around in the afterlife with this. So he started to do this, and as he sort of announced this, initially it was a Facebook post, he had a lot of comments and a flurry of different aspects of abuse. People were sort of challenging him for his behavior, saying, you know, this is an absolute crazy thing to do. You know, this is a perfectly good Bentley. Other people should be driving it, and you just want to bury it. You know, what a waste. How stupid are you? And this seemed to spur him on, so that he basically started to feed on a media frenzy, where more and more people came out and started shouting about him. So eventually he said, okay, come and watch the ceremony where I actually come to bury my Bentley. And everyone sort of turned up for this. And it was just at this point that he stopped the ceremony and said, wait, you're telling me off for burying my Bentley, but yet every day people are dying with something far more precious than my Bentley. People are dying with organs that can be used to save other people's lives. And this turned out to be the opening of Organ Donation Week. And this is something that he had staged but he wanted to flag up that people shouldn't be dying with their organs when their organs could be put to support and be transplanted into other people to save their lives. So really, the message here is every donor is precious. And we've heard one extremely powerful story already tonight. But I also want to stress that organ donation is a rare event. So if we look at the UK population, there's roughly 66 million people in the UK, but roughly 1% of those people die per year. And the important thing to note here, though, is only a small number end up being donors, deceased donors, people who've died and ended up becoming organ donors. So that's roughly 1 in 400 people that die become donors. And this is really because people don't die in circumstances where they may be suitable to donate, and they may not be appropriate to proceed for donors for other reasons. But I'll touch on a few other important points as to why this is the case and why not many people end up becoming donors. So, few questions which we sort of shared with you in a survey earlier on was this. Imagine if you had organ failure and needed a transplant, would you accept an organ? That's the first question. The second question is, are you on the organ donor register? And have you discussed your organ donation wishes with anyone? So this is what NHSBT have sort of looked into in the past, and we found that 95% of the population, if they had organ failure and needed a transplant, 95% of the population would accept an organ. And when we asked about the organ donor register, 25 million were on the organ donor register, roughly 35% of the population. I put an asterisk by that because obviously there's been a law change over the last 10 months, and we'll be mentioning that again later. But in terms of discussing your organ donation wishes with anyone, I think it's an important point that we do need to ask and address. And we are looking at trying to increase the awareness of this so that we can share our organ donation wishes. So is it important to discuss your organ donation wishes with others? So coming back to this inverted pyramid, I think the answer is yes. And I just draw out 2 points. 620,000 deaths in the UK, under half of those happened in hospital, and a smaller group were potential donors, and yet those that were suitable were referred. But in terms of donation requests, just over 3,000 donation requests, but only 2,300 actually gave their permission. So those were people who were asked at a very distressing time if their deceased loved ones would they be suitable to be organ donors for this, and would go to the families to ask for permission. But really only 70% of the families approached say yes, and that's quite a significant factor. But what we know is people are more likely to say yes if they've previously discussed their organ donation wishes. And we've heard even from the story earlier on this evening as to how important it is to have that discussion. What we also know is from the Black, Asian and minority ethnic groups is currently only 40% of people say yes. So way below the UK figure of 70%. So that's quite an important point for us to reflect on. So there was an NHSBT strategy that was implemented in 2013 that was called Taking Organ Transplantation to 2020. And it was really to try and focus on that particular aspect of the of families giving consent or authorization for donation. The figure at the time was 57%, but really what we wanted was a target to go from 60% to 80%, or from 3 out of 5 people or families to 4 out of 5 families. And I should point out, as mentioned before, that as far as Black, Asian and minority ethnic groups are concerned, only 2 out of 5 families, when approached, say yes for organ donation. And the overall figure at the end of 2020 was 70%. So the actual target was not achieved. So clearly more work is needed. And perhaps more significantly, we need to embrace new opportunities. So this was the law change around organ donation that was implemented in May of last year. And the idea is that we go from an opt-in system to an opt-out system. So this was implemented in May 2020, but the message and the publicity and the awareness campaigns that were set up obviously were diluted by COVID-19 and the pandemic. So I'll say a little bit more about the Black, Asian and minority ethnic groups. So this is a summary figure, again from NHSBT. And if you look at the figure here, this represents, according to the census, the percentage of Black, Asian and minority ethnic community in the UK, according to the 2011 census. And this was the data back then where the people who opted in physically into the organ donor register were less than the 14%. But disturbingly, nearly 75%, or 3 out of 4 people of all the people who are opting out, were from the Black, Asian and minority ethnic groups. And so clearly we need to understand what that's about. But significantly, 30% or over 30% of people on all the transplant waiting lists are from Black, Asian and minority ethnic groups. So that's an important factor. And 27% of all transplants that take place are from the Black, Asian and minority ethnic groups. But still short of the 31% that's on the transplant waiting list. And there's still quite a fair amount of work to go. So what we have to say is more patients are on the transplant waiting list with organ failure from Black, Asian and minority ethnic groups. And this is because of, predominantly because of the causes of their organ failure. So predominantly when it comes to renal failure, it's due to hypertension and diabetes. And there's a higher incidence of, in particular, diabetes in the Asian ethnic groups. There's also less donors, as I've just shown you. There are less potential donors from our communities opting into the organ donor register, and significantly, and more relevance now, there's more of our community opting out of the organ donor register itself. And what we've also heard is less families from our community are giving consent in that very sensitive time, 2 out of 5. And so what this results in is more people from our communities wait longer for that organ, on average 6 months more when it comes to kidney transplants, and they're not as well matched. And we know that if you have a better matched organ, it's going to last longer. So in other words, if you have a poorer matched organ, you're going to have poorer outcomes. It's not going to last as well, and it's not going to be as effective in the long term. So on that particular note, we've already touched upon this. Millie has mentioned about the Leave Them Certain campaign. I think this is an excellent campaign that's been set up. And the crucial message here is to talk to your loved ones about organ donation. Again, if I can come back to that powerful story we heard earlier on, if Pragnaben hadn't had that conversation with Kuram, there may have been a different decision that would have been made at that point. And that would be a very interesting thing to think about. You know, she obviously felt that he was too young to make that decision and wanted him to be a bit older, yet he was quite a determined person and clearly shared what he wanted. And so she was left certain at that point. So I think having that conversation is really important. So this is one of the slides that just covers a few aspects. So this line on top here represents the number of people waiting on the transplant list. And this is quite important here. So this is between 2010 to 2020. So this shows the fact that the transplant list is getting smaller, the numbers are getting less, is obviously positive. The number of donors which is in dark blue, are increasing from where it was previously, and the number of transplants generally are increasing. So there is progress, but it's fair to say that we were obviously hit last year by COVID, and the numbers would have been hit significantly. But you know, there's still a fair amount of work to do. So I'm just going to talk about organ donation a little bit more, because I think it celebrates a lot of really important parts. I'm just going to talk about it from start to finish. And this is a fantastically coordinated procedure from start to finish, with over 150 people in making it happen. So I just want you to reflect on this. You know, we celebrate our NHS staff. I think this is a fantastic tribute to everyone involved with organ donation and transplantation. And to my mind, it's a modern miracle. It shows everything that's great about the NHS. So one donor, there'll be a family involved with that one donor and the next of kin who will all be involved. There'll be the ITU team, all the doctors and nurses and other people working in the intensive care units looking after that person during their terminal illness. And then there's the specialist nurses in organ donation, who have the very delicate job of approaching the families when someone is considered to be suitable for organ donation, and to have that very precious and important conversation with the family. There is the Organ Donation and Transplant Hub in Bristol, and this is a computerized database with a whole load of other people that manage this database and manage the calls, and they're the coordination center for the UK for all the transplants that happen. There are an army of lab technicians and tissue typists up and down the country processing people's blood to make sure that when you take out a donor organ, it can be safely implanted into a recipient. And then there's ambulance crews that carry the organs across different parts of the country. And then there's the teams that perform the organ donation itself, often comprised of a minimum of 4 people from each hospital, but often it can be up to 6 or 7 people going. And then there's the donor hospital teams in the donor hospital itself. All the teams who perhaps don't deal with organ donation normally have to look after and accommodate the retrieval teams to make sure that they can do their job safely and effectively. And the outcome of this, which is a fantastic outcome, and this is where I feel that I am blessed in the job that I do, is transplants. And why is that? Well, transplants transform lives. And I'll just pick out one organ, the organ which I'm predominantly involved with now, and this is kidney transplantation. So when your kidneys fail, you end up needing to be on some form of dialysis, and it could be hemodialysis. And what the hemodialysis machine does is it cleans and filters your blood. So you have to be connected to that dialysis machine so that it can clean and filter your blood. Now, your kidneys are attached to you and your bloodstream, and it's doing that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all the time. We clearly can't connect you to a machine to do the same job. So we have to connect you for the best balance, which is roughly 3 to 4 hours, 3 times a week. But if you just imagine that as an individual, you have to go to a hospital-based setting, be connected up to this machine for 3 to 4 hours, and then you have to be disconnected from that machine, and then you try and get on with your normal life. And it keeps you alive, but it doesn't allow you to live and enjoy the life the way you want to enjoy your life. There's restrictions on what you can have, so you don't have too much fluid. You don't have too much in the way of toxins building up, so you have to avoid things like chocolates, crisps, high protein, and all the things that are particularly toxic to your blood. So having a kidney transplant transforms people's lives by getting you off dialysis. The next thing is transplants save lives. So not only does transplants transform lives, but it saves lives. This is a picture of Sandeep, who was a heart transplant recipient, and his comment is, "Not a day goes by when I do not think of my donor for giving me a second chance of life." I don't know Sandeep, this slide was kindly shared with me, but Sandeep is hoping that his story of survival can encourage other people from our communities to become organ donors. So I think that that is a fantastic message. Final thing to say though is people die on the waiting list. And I just wanted to show you this again. So there's lots of big figures here, 6,138, 1,580 donors, 3,760 transplants. But there's this gap here. What does that gap represent? That gap represents people who haven't been transplanted. And what we do know is that people die on the transplant waiting list, and it's estimated at 3 per day, or 1,000 people dying per year. Or put another way, 2 jumbo jets crashing. Now, obviously, we're in really odd times where we've become blunted to these sorts of figures. Every time we turn the TV on and we hear the COVID figures, it's absolutely shocking. But you just have to think about the individual stories and the individual people and the impact it has on other people. So this is something which we want to say. So 70% of families approached say yes. We want to improve that. And if we improve it to 80%, as was intended from taking organ transplantation to 2020, that would result in reducing that gap. So more people would be successfully transplanted. So to summarize, I just want to share with you that every donor is precious. I want to tell you that organ donation is a rare event. But when it happens, it's a modern miracle, and it celebrates everything that's great about the NHS. I've told you that transplants transform lives. I've told you that transplants save lives. But it's important to recognize that people die on the transplant waiting list. And it's a particular challenge for our communities because we have more people on the transplant waiting list comparatively, and they wait longer, therefore, and when they do get transplanted, because there's a smaller pool of well-matched organs, they don't do as well. The law change in May 2020 was diluted by COVID, but we really hope that we can use this now as a real fresh impetus for us to address this. So I think it's really important that you talk to others about your own organ donation wishes. So I'd like to thank you for listening to me. And what I'd like you to do is, I've really talked about organ donation and transplantation. I've talked about one type of donor, which is deceased donation. There's obviously another aspect to organ donation, which is living donation, in particular for kidney transplantation. And I'm now going to pass you over to a video to basically outline the BBC News headlines around Prafula's story in her organ donation. So thank you very much.
Organ donation in the UK has been transformed in the past decade, with the number of donations almost doubling. But there's still a shortage of donors from Black and Asian communities, despite patients from these backgrounds being more likely to need a transplant. And that's because these groups are more susceptible to illnesses such as diabetes and hypertension, which may then result in organ failure. Adina Campbell, our Community Affairs correspondent, has this special report.
I've had kidney failure for quite a while. since I was 23. I'm 38 now.
Ashley's kidneys are now only working at 5%. She runs a support group for people with similar experiences and is hoping to find a donor. Like Ashley, nearly a third of those on the active transplant list are either black or Asian. And people from these communities wait an extra year compared with white patients.
Put it right under your eyes.
Ashley's had to scale back her work as a makeup artist because her health is deteriorating. Ethnicity matters because donors from similar backgrounds are more likely to be a closer match.
I find like other races, they understand it a lot more, and it's like it's a given to be on a transplant, on a being a donor. It's a given, but then within my communities, it's not a given.
Unlike many people from minority groups, Bharti Pythia was an organ donor. She collapsed at home and died in hospital 3 months ago.
She was in hospital ICU unit for 5-6 days. But in my mind, the damage was already done here before we went to hospital. I didn't even know she was an organ donor. I found out when I offered her organs in the hospital.
Relatives have the final say about organ donation, but only half as many families of potential black and Asian donors give their permission compared with white families, which means only 4% of deceased donors overall are from minority groups.
As a Hindu, we cremate the body. So that was my logic at the time. We're going to burn what we don't need. She was a giver all her life. Why deny her the last opportunity?
When we pass away from this world.
Discussions about organ donation are already happening at this Sikh Gurdwara in Luton. Professor Gert Randauer wrote an action plan for the NHS 5 years ago, looking at how to improve donation rates among ethnic minorities.
There are perceived cultural and religious barriers, but the biggest issue is a lack of trust in the healthcare system, where people don't trust establishments.
Another option is more transplants from living donors. Prafula Shah donated one of her kidneys in March this year at the Royal Free Hospital in London.
My motivation is my niece, who's been waiting for a kidney for 2 years. I wasn't a direct match for her, so we're doing this through the kidney sharing scheme. So my kidney is going to go to somebody who's been waiting for a while as well, and my niece is getting a kidney as well.
In the last few minutes, Prafula has been put to sleep. All the final preparations are being made, and the surgery itself should take just over 2 hours. People from minority groups are more likely to need an organ transplant because they're at greater risk of developing medical conditions. And this is Prafula's kidney, now on its way to help someone else. 3 weeks later, back at home, both Prafula and her niece Shakti are recovering well and are now planning a holiday with their family.
I've not felt this energetic and sort of clear-headed for years.
Shakti and I have always been very close, and I think this has even brought us closer together. I don't have any children of my own, so I think she's my little. Yes, definitely.
Adina Campbell, BBC News.
Gosh, that takes me back a bit. So that was actually 3 years ago. In fact, 3 years ago last Sunday, that event happened at the Royal Free Hospital, and I donated my left kidney to Shakti, my niece. And I guess the motivation was seeing Shakti in need of a kidney. And so the best thing I could do was share the kidney that I didn't need with her, which is exactly what I've done. We've heard from some really great speakers this evening and some statistics that tell us that actually there's a huge need, a massive waiting list, particularly for kidney donations. Millie earlier referred to 580 people from the Asian community waiting for kidney transplants and on dialysis. Bimbi referred to dialysis as, yes, it gives you life, but it isn't actually living. And so I guess that was actually the reason for my decision to donate my kidney to Shakti. Over the 3 years since that event, I've become involved in promoting organ donation in our community and wider as an NHS Blood and Transplant organ donation ambassador, but also as a key member of the Jain and Hindu organ donation steering committee. And during that time, I've come across a lot of wonderful people's stories, like the story of Pragnaben that we heard earlier with Karan, Sandeep Bhai's story, which was shared with me earlier this week by his lovely wife, Kajal Ben. And I think there are very many people in the community who do this wonderful seva. I'm just one person. There are so many others. Many years ago, Madhusudan Bhai donated his kidney to his Banevi. And I hear of stories like this all the time. So it isn't actually that unusual. And the one thing I would like to say to everybody listening today is please at least have that conversation with your family so they know your wishes. I did what I did for Shakti as a living donor, and it's lovely to see her blossoming and living her life as she should be as a 27-year-old now, who is pursuing a successful career. And she's doing what a young person of that age should be doing. And that for me is incredible to see. And if I had another spare kidney, I would do it all again. So it's been an incredible experience for me. I recommend it to anyone that is in this situation. And if anyone needs help or guidance or, just wants to chat to somebody who's been through it, then do reach out to us. And don't forget that we are here to answer questions this evening as well. So if you've got any questions for any of our speakers, please do post those in the comments box on YouTube. Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Bimbi, and your wonderful slides as well. You shared with us some really important information about why the community needs to do what the community needs to do to meet the challenges that we face. I'm going to now go to Jyoti Ben, who is a consultant surgeon, Macmillan consultant surgeon at a hospital in Staffordshire. She's my partner in crime with these webinars, has been helping me organize and reach out to speakers and doing everything in the background. But today, and for every session, she will be facilitating the Q&A session. So back to all of our speakers, and Jyoti Ben, shall we go with that?
Thank you very much, Madane Marajay Jinendra. If I could invite all the speakers to join us on the panel. તો અત્યાર સુધી આપણે શું શીખ્યા છે? UK માં અંગદાનનો કાયદો બદલાઈ ગયો છે. વસંત 2020 થી તમે તમારો નિર્ણય ના નોંધો તો ત્યાં સુધી તમે અંગદાતા ગણાશો. એ આપણે જાણ્યું છે. તો અંગદાનની જરૂરત શાને માટે છે? એક તો જીવન બચાવવા માટે અને બીજું જીવનમાં સુધારો લાવવા માટે. એટલે આપણે અત્યાર સુધી એ શીખ્યા છે. હજી બી તમારે કોઈને કઈ બી પ્રશ્ન પૂછવા હોય તો પ્લીઝ તમે ચેટમાં અહીંયા મૂકજો and we can ask our panel. So I'm now going to go back in English so that our panel can join us. We have had a number of questions, so I'm going to take it in turn. Dr. Bimbi, if I may start with you, you alluded in your talk to there are only certain circumstances where people are suitable for organ donation. Would you just be able to tell us what those circumstances actually are?
So I suppose 1% of the UK population die each year, and many people die outside the hospital. So roughly, so 280,000 may die in hospital itself, and the people who die outside hospital may not be suitable for different reasons, because when your heart stops beating outside the hospital, you obviously need to have a circulating bloodstream to get to the organs, to keep the organs functioning. There's also other reasons as to why they may not be suitable. For example, if they have cancer, and it's spread to different parts of the body. If there's significant infections, they won't be suitable. But the suitable donors are people who are what's called brain dead, usually. So what this means is they have had tests on their brain function to see if there's any way in which they could be alive, but they kept sort of artificially breathing and their heart is beating, but actually there's no brain function. So this is one of the main sources of organ donors. And we do all these tests as doctors to make sure that the brain stem function isn't active in that setting. Not all donors come from that setting. So some are known as donation after cardiac death. So they may not pass all those tests, and so they're not considered brain dead, in which case they may not be compatible with survival. And so what happens is that they're considered for a different type of death, which is donation after cardiac death. So under very careful planned circumstances, the patient is allowed to have their heart to stop beating and the organs are retrieved. And because it's in a hospital setting, the organs are flushed and carefully sort of cared for, basically.
Oh, that's really useful. Thank you, Dr. Bimbi. I mean, one thing I would certainly like to reassure our audience is we do have tests to make sure people are dead. We are not going to deprive them of their organs if there is any chance of them surviving. So we do want to reassure people that they will be dead in order for us to continue with any kind of organ retrieval.
That is absolutely essential that happens, and you know, that is definitely the case.
Yeah, so I just wanted to reiterate that message. Thank you so much, Dr. Bimbi. If I could come to you, Millie, I mean, in your position, you'll be leading a lot of these campaigns, and it's quite clear that we as a community, as an Indian community, have a greater demand for organs due to the various other conditions we suffer with, but actually there's a big disparity, isn't there, between the supply and demand, effectively. What do you see as the block to this?
Yes, thank you very much. Could I just say before I answer that question, I was, as ever, completely overcome by the courage that was demonstrated by you, Pragna, and I assure you that we will look after the recipients. That is really very important. That's what we're here to do. But thank you for the question, Jyoti. I think the real issue is that it's about trust in the end, I think, which has been mentioned a couple of times. And it isn't just organ donation. We can talk amongst friends here. We know that that's been demonstrated through the vaccination program as well. People have to trust the authorities in order to donate. And it is such a fundamental thing. Blood is a little easier because it happens once and then it happens again. But when you're there dealing with the death of a loved one, and we've heard it today, and I hear it so often, you know, you have to trust the authorities. And I think what we have to do is we must do the things we're already doing, which is promote the donation, which is promote, you know, discussions, which is encourage people, which is work with the community. But together we need to build trust. And I was very pleased with you when you explained the situation and your clarifications, Jyoti, because without that trust, that, you know, this is not something that is done without a complete ethical framework around it. When we first looked at the change of law, that was when I first joined NHSBT, actually 3 years ago. I used to sit in on the focus groups, and it was very obvious to me that there was a huge deficit of trust, that people believed all kinds of things which were so terrifying for them, so unacceptable in terms of the you know, respect with which and love with which they wanted their people to be, families to be treated. So I think that is the one fundamental thing that we collectively need to. We will carry on doing the right things, into investing. I promise you, I assure you. And as Dr. Fernandez has said, that the clinical, and you yourself, the clinical support is there. But we must build trust that this is an ethical process, that it isn't about doing things that you wouldn't want to happen to your loved one. And that is the most important thing.
No, that's excellent. Thank you so much, Millie. And I'm aware that you have to go. So if I could just ask you one more question before you go, and we're very grateful you've given us so much of your precious time today. So how are we going to build trust in our community?
Yeah. If I can just explain to our colleagues, I have a 94-year-old mother staying with me, and she needs her dinner, otherwise she's not going to sleep at night. That's why I said, may I just go? The food is cooked, so just a question of giving her the food. So how do we build this trust? I think those of us who are involved in this have to be passionate ambassadors. And in a way, it's on us as well, isn't it? It's on us as the practitioners. You're the clinical practitioner. I'm the management practitioner. We've had a donor here. We need to keep on reinforcing this message on a personal basis and on a corporate basis. I think the other thing is that I was very pleased with the presentation today. And I think the more transparent we can be about what actually happens, better it is. Because let's not shilly-shally, just not try to kind of avoid things. Because if we avoid things, then people build their imagination into something that then becomes something that hampers a decision. So we ourselves are very responsible. I feel very responsible. I know you all do. And we just need to have this very careful conversation, but to be transparent. Right? That's really on us, which is why I want to be part of this group. I wanted to be here today, and I want to be part of these discussions because it is up to us as much as anything else.
Yeah. No, that's really useful. Thank you so much. Millie, I don't want to hold you up. You are absolutely welcome to stay, but
I'm going to go and feed the old lady now.
Thank you so much.
Not at all. Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me, everybody.
Millie, thank you so much from Oshwal Association, or all of us here, and for sharing insights and, of course, what you've just assured everyone publicly. So really pleased that you could join us. Thank you.
We'll meet again soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Millie. Thank you very much.
So if we've got loads more questions actually, which is excellent because it shows a great deal of interactivity with our audience. So that's amazing. Bragnaben, your talk was, absolutely heartfelt, and I bet there wasn't a dry face anywhere. It really was emotional and incredibly brave, but doesn't happen that often in our community, does it? So how was your decision received by your family and our communities?
Amazing. Like I said, we had amazing care. Karen had amazing care at St Mary's Hospital. And for the 5 days that he was there, we had 24-hour visiting time for him. Wow. Which it was incredible, with all the family and friends that came to visit him, to see him, knowing that he's not going to make it, but they still wanted to come to see him. And with that, they all learned that he was a donor. And I can't tell you, I think more or less 70% signed up at the time. So he had encouraged so many people, and all these youngsters and his friends that came as well. They were so taken by his want and something they didn't know of him. And then, of course, we had the prayers. And like I said at the Biswano, we had over 1,400 people. I was just gobsmacked completely. And we had a little stand there also with organ donation leaflets and cards and that, where people were welcome to take and sign up. So I was very open about sharing Karen's story and sharing what Karen did. You know, the fact that he wanted to help others at such a young age. And of course, at that time, you know, I was all over the place. But all I didn't know was that this was my time. Whatever I need to do for Karen. And hence, if organ donation was something that he felt so strongly about, I was also going to forward that on. And like we also, after the funeral, we had leaflets and everything again at the table for whoever was interested. And our community, the Garapatda Centre in Kenton, you know, they happily have got a photo of Karen and a letter from the donations to say how many people he's helped and everything. So it's not just us as a family or the immediate friends that knew Karen. It's the 1,400 people that came. They will pass their word on. And the number of people that will hire that hall and come to see the hall, they all read the notice board. They all acknowledge him. And I, as you all now know, I'm very open in being very proud of my son, in giving such precious gift. And like I said, if he hadn't received the donation at birth, he wouldn't be here for the 19 years. So he received a gift and he left leaving gifts. What more can you ask for?
Absolutely amazing. And what's amazing is that it's not just the 4 families to whom he's changed their lives. It's also the education that's coming with the story.
Oh, yes.
Every time you relay this story, I mean, we've had 221 people live watching us today, all of whom will have heard your amazing, powerful story, each of whom will go and tell other people, and there's going to be this ripple effect again, a bit like you said happened at the Biswano, right?
Yes.
If I could just pick up on Brugnabin, you said that when he was, those 6 days he was on ICU, a number of people came to see. What was interesting, I thought, was you mentioned that a number of his friends didn't know about his expressed wish to be an organ donor. Now that's interesting, because that suggests that people are still not having the conversation, right?
Yes, yes.
And that's what this is all about today, that we want to get this conversation started, these very difficult conversations. So no, you've been incredibly brave. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
No,
and Karen.
You go, yeah. Dr. Bimbi, I've got a number of medical questions, so I'm not ignoring you, Prof. Laben. I will come to you. I've got a couple of questions for you, but if I could get a couple of these medically ones done. So one of the questions, Dr. Bimbi, was, does the age of a donor actually matter? Because as people get older, they will have a number of other medical conditions that come along as we get older. And then at that point, are their organs actually of any use to anyone? Or are only some of them? Or how does that work?
So so we carry out tests on the donor, blood tests and other tests to make sure that that particular person, that donor, is suitable to donate. There isn't an obvious upper limit, and in terms of physical age, there's 2 ways of looking at it. There's the chronological age and the biological age. and you could have completely fit 75-year-old sort of being a donor, and someone sort of 20 or 30 years younger who's so unfit that they wouldn't be suitable in terms of being a donor. I'm trying to remember some of the actual figures. I think it's very rare to donate above the age of 75, but we don't really use that as a physical cutoff from that. So we really go on physiological age rather than chronological age, and we carry out other tests. And
it's fair to say, isn't it, Dr. Bimbi, that now people are living so much longer. I mean, I never in my life thought I would carry out an operation on a man who's 105 years old, but I have, and actually operating on 90 plus now is yes. a routine, which I have to say, when I was training 30 years ago, I never thought would happen. So I think you're absolutely right. This is about how fit you are, regardless of the actual numbers that are attached to your age. So yeah, that's important. And are all organs then, if you're 75, 77 and fit, still running a marathon, can all your organs, if there are a match, be suitable?
So there's conventions that we use. So as a quick sort of summary, the organs that you can use for organ donation are the heart, lungs, the liver, and the liver can potentially be used for 2 separate recipients as well. 2 kidneys. I think you'd know that as a urologist. I'm not sure if you would actually.
I went to that lecture.
And then the pancreas and small bowel as well can be used for transplantation. But then there's also other organs and tissues. So there's composite tissues as well that can be used as well. So your question was specifically the types of organs. So there's conventions, and we tend to think about, with bearing in mind what I just said, as long as the functional tests are okay, we tend to focus on the kidneys and the liver. But as you get older, the heart is perhaps disregarded. I can't quote you chapter and verse as to what age you stop sort of looking and considering the heart from that. But it becomes organ dependent, really. But again, we carry out careful tests to make sure.
No, that's great, thank you. And I've just seen a message ping up on the chat saying someone 74 would love to donate young for their age. So to that person who's put that message, if you're fit and you pass all these tests, you can still donate. So that's great news. Dr. Bimbi, if I could come to you for another question. Is it true that people from Asia and Africa may not be able to donate due to malaria?
No. So we don't disregard people who've had a previous history of malaria, but if you've got active sort of malaria and you've got the parasite circulating in your bloodstream, then you won't be suitable. And this covers and leads on to another important question, that if you've got any active infection, you shouldn't proceed to organ donation, be it a live donor or a deceased donor. That's the simple reason that you don't want to transmit infection to the recipient. Another aspect which I touched upon earlier is you shouldn't have active malignancy as well, because that could be transmitted to the recipient as well. So these are the sort of careful tests that we have to do, and we have to make careful sort of decisions at the time to make sure that we can proceed.
But it's not all cancer, just so our audience knows. It's not all cancers that mean you can't donate. There's obviously certain types of cancers for which you can still donate, and all of that will be explained to you as and when. Brofulaben, thank you so much, Dr. Bimbi. I'm going to come to Brofulaben. I'm worried she's falling asleep there. One of the questions that I've seen a couple of times pop up is this whole thing about how and where does organ donation fit into our religion? So what is the Jain religious stance? And I specifically say Jainism because we are a Jain organization. And so I expect that most of our audience today will also be Jain. So if I could just ask you to focus on that, particularly because you're also a representative on the Jain and Hindu Organ Donation Steering Committee. So could you just tell us a bit about that?
So I think from a Jain or any faith perspective, the majority of faiths actually support organ donation. From a Jain perspective, particularly, we talk about seva and anukampa. So anukampa is benevolence, and seva is doing something good for others. So if we talk about those two principles of Jainism, then absolutely organ donation falls within the remit of those two principles. And based on that, indeed, Jain Dharma and the Jain faith supports organ donation. And like the event that we'll be talking at today, Oshwal community particularly has done a number of awareness raising events in relation to this and talking about the barriers that we sometimes put, I think, ourselves when we start talking about faith. But our Jain faith leaders support organ donation. A little while ago, I think almost 2 years ago, I had the pleasure of meeting Shilapiji on one of her visits to London. And I had a half an hour audience with her talking about organ donation. And she has in fact recorded a wonderful message of support. Same with Rakesh Pai from Srimad Rajchandra Mission in Dharampur, very supportive of organ donation. In terms of our own Swetambar, Murti Pujak Salg, I've also had this conversation with Bharat Sahib in India, talking about my own donation, actually my own live donation, and then talking about, you know, whether when we are no longer here, the soul has already traveled elsewhere. The body, which is what I call the kind of furniture, is going to be cremated. So what does that mean? Do we do the greatest seva that we can do for another being and actually put that part of our dharma into practice? So absolutely, I think from a seva and benevolence principle, it absolutely supports organ donation.
And આપણા ધર્મમાં તો એમ જ કહે છે ને કે આપણા મૃત્યુ પછી આપણો આત્મા દેહને છોડીને જતો રહે છે, તો આપણો દેહ તો પછી નાકામ છે ને, તો બીજાને કામ આવે તો એ તો મોટી સેવા કહેવાય. And that's a practical note, isn't it?
It is.
Body that we're cremating, which could be of use to somebody else.
Absolutely. And we just heard earlier from Pragnaben talking about Karan and the 4 lives that he has transformed. Bimbi talked about Sandeep Pai in his presentation, who as a result of a transplant has a second chance of life. And so there isn't, in my opinion, greater seva to do, actually. So if we can do this, then I think, yes, absolutely, we should do that. And majority of the Jain community, and as I said, majority of faiths that we talk to in interfaith events actually do support organ donation.
No, that's great. Thank you for answering that. I might actually, Pragnaben, just come to you and say, from a Hindu, Sanatan Dharam Tarathi, I assume this is the same stance in the Hindu faith?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. It's the same. It's exactly the same. And it's, you know, going back to Karan, it's a teaching we give our children and our learnings. And hence, you know, they make their decisions. And I'm glad he made a wise one. And following this, I hope many others do, and especially youngsters too, in passing the word on.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Dr. Bimbi, I've had a very specific question here. I had a corneal transplant and cannot donate blood. Would I be able to donate organs?
I'm a little bit surprised that you can't donate blood, actually, from that. But I know there are some very generic questions that are asked when you go for blood transfusion. And I've tried a few times to donate blood. And, you know, they do the drop test. My drop doesn't drop fast enough. And so I've been sent away a few times. and told yes, and I just get teased by family members that, you know, I haven't got the right sort of blood, but you know, that's my personal crisis. But I think, yes, the answer would be yes, you can be an organ donor. We have had people who've had other transplants who've gone on to transplant different organs as well. The important point is to carry out those tests, which I mentioned earlier on, to make sure that the organs are functioning and that they would be suitable to proceed from a safety point of view in terms of low risk of transmission of any infections. So someone who's had a corneal transplant can be an organ donor.
No, that's great. Thank you, Dr. Bimbi. There is another question. Is organ donation different to donating the whole body for research? I think I might just answer that and say, yes, it is different. They're both different pathways, and so very different. And actually, if you donate your body for research, you don't have as many rigorous tests to go through as you do when we talk about organ donation. So where there are so many more questions, but unfortunately we are rapidly running out of time. So Pragnaben, I'm just going to come to you and say any closing remarks, key message for our community. There are still 195 people watching us.
Oh, you know, with having been a donor family, the key thing I would say is communication, talk. You know, it truly does help in knowing what you're doing is the right way, and you're fulfilling their wishes. This is what they wanted, and also, although I don't know current recipients and I've never met them, it gives me such, I can't say joy, but I can't express it, how I feel that my son has allowed 4 other people to continue their lives. And especially the age is just a number, I take that. But when I think a 20-year-old has his heart, someone his own age, you know, my thing is, you know, there's no words to express how I feel in that. And you will always feel the departure and the void of losing someone. But when you know what they have done through a communication, through being able to say, yes, I know this is exactly what I've done, because I questioned myself many a times. And I went back to his bedside and I kept saying, Karen, please, if you don't want me to go ahead with this, give me a sign, give me a signal, tell Mom this isn't what I want. Because I kept going to and fro, and those nurses were amazing. I never felt pressurized, but I knew I was making the right choice. So communication. Thank you.
Thank you, Pragnaben. Prafulaben, if I could ask you, is there a key message you'd like to say to our audience today?
So I think Millie covered it when she was talking about this idea of what are the barriers. I think it is about trust and understanding, raising awareness, learning, educating ourselves and finding out more about what does the process involve. I think, if I may say this as a community leader, I think we shouldn't always listen to what we see or hear on WhatsApp. I think there's an element of fake news that travels much faster than real news. So often it is that we should find out the facts from people that we know can give us the correct information and the accurate information. So, and you know, it would be amiss of me to not say this. So I think have a heart to heart, have that conversation that we're all having now, and leave the people certain about your wishes. But, you know, don't wait for the law to do this for you. make a positive decision that actually will help somebody else. And, you know, Pragna Ben's case, so many times she's told me this, out of tragedy, something amazing and positive has happened. So I think that's what it's about, actually. It's understanding, you know, what is it that I need to find out? And it was very true in my case when I donated my kidney. I went to find out and do all of the research. In fact, Bimbi sitting here was the person with whom I signed my consent after I'd found out all the information and done all of the tests and things. So I think, you know, do a bit of work yourself, do a bit of research, find out the accurate information before making your decision, but do make the decision. Don't leave people wondering what that decision is.
That's great. Very powerful message. Dr. Bimbi, take home message to our community.
Well, I would say from a personal point of view, it's a privilege to be part of the transplant community. Transplantation is absolutely fantastic as a specialty. And when you see how it transforms lives and how it saves lives, and it's not only the patients, it's the people around the patients and other people beyond that who are so positively affected by this. But the real privilege and honor that I have in transplantation is hearing stories like Pragna Ben's and how fantastic and how powerful and wonderful people like her have had in terms of really difficult decisions in a very challenging time to honor the son's wishes. And it really is a privilege to hear those stories. And I'm just so grateful for you sharing that today. So thank you very much. So my message is really, please be moved by what you've heard today and just have a conversation.
Can I just say something? Going to Dr. Bimbi and to all the surgeons out there and the medical team, you know, I sincerely say thank you, because I truly did get so much support step by step. It wasn't felt I was pressurized in any way. And I remember one time I walked into Karen's room and there was a doctor there I didn't recognize, and he told me he was from the organ donor. And I said, I only have one thing that I request from you. And he said, what? And I said, my son will be giving a gift of life, precious gifts to these families. All I request is that you respect my son in after he's donated his gifts, and you respect him as a person, as who he is. And that was my only request to them. And, you know, when I went downstairs after, because they allowed me to bathe and dress my son with my sister, Karen was at peace. His face looked at peace. And they were amazing. And I could see where they had obviously operated and everything. And I can't tell you, I was so touched. They did respect my son. They really did. So I thank you all. You know, that means a lot. It truly does. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. That's a message for everyone who worries like I did. You know, how will they treat my son after? They'll take what they need, and then how will he be? You know, I had that worry. You know, just everything. You know, his stem cells are still here because he donated stem cells too. So, you know, you worry about all these things, that this is your son. But I can hand on my heart and say, I truly was amazed. And I too was corrected in my thoughts and my perceptions of organ donations. So thank you again.
So that's a really important message, Pragnabin, because people will be worrying that you know, your loved ones are going to be cut open and things taken, and then you know, is there this disfigured body that you're going to see with an open casket? And actually, it's lovely to remind everybody that we certainly, you know, we as clinicians do treat people with respect both in life and in death. And you know, and you can still have an open casket after organ donation, because we do not disfigure people. So that's thank you so much. So વડીલો ભાઈઓ તથા બહેનો, આપણે હવે એન્ડમાં આવ્યા છે. Thank you very much for joining. Once again, આપણે very difficult discussions આજે કર્યા છે. Last time બી આપણે mental health ના વિષય પર બધી ચર્ચા કરી હતી, અને આજે organ donation ના વિષય પર બી એકદમ awkward, difficult બધી ચર્ચા છે આ વિષય. શરૂઆતમાં મેં તમને કીધું હતું કે અંગદાન આપણે જીવન બચાવવા માટે કરીએ છીએ અને જીવન સુધારવા માટે કરીએ છીએ, અને કોરમના મૃત્યુમાંથી આપણે કેટલાઓના જીવન બચાવ્યા છે, અને પ્રફુલ્લાબેનનો કિડનીના દાનમાંથી એમની નીસની એમને જિંદગીનો સુધારો કર્યો છે. So we've seen both examples today. પણ બધા પ્લીઝ તમે યાદ રાખજો કે કાયદો બદલાઈ ગયો છે ગયા વર્ષથી, અને જો તમે તમારું નિર્ણય ના નોંધો તો તમે અંગદાતા ગણાશો. એટલે the best thing તમે કરી શકો કે તમારા કુટુંબ અને તમારા મિત્રાઓ સાથે બધા આ ચર્ચા કરો કે તમારી શું ઈચ્છા છે, તમારે શું કરવું છે. આ વિષય તમારા મૃત્યુ વખતે આવે તો તમારે શું કરવું છે. તમારી જિંદગી કોઈની બચાવી છે, કોઈને સુધારો કરાવવો છે, તો એ તમે અત્યારે જ તમારા કુટુંબ અને મિત્ર સાથે ચર્ચા કરો. બધાને મારા જય જિનેન્દ્ર, and I'll hand over to Prafullaben.
Absolutely, and I think હું પણ એ જ કહીશ કે તમે આ કાયદા ની પાછળ ના રહેતા, પણ પ્લીઝ તમારું પોઝિટિવ ડિસિઝન તમે કરજો, અને organ donation માટે તમે સાઇન કરી અને સાઇન અપ કરી, અને તમારા મિત્રો અને તમારા પરિવાર સાથે ડેફિનેટલી વાત કરજો. Right, so we've had, as Jyotiben just said, a very challenging conversation about a very difficult subject today. Our next, I want to thank all of our speakers today, starting with Jayesh Bhai, Nilesh Bhai, Millie, who unfortunately had to leave us, but you know, has given us an incredible insight into the work of NHS Blood and Transplant. Bimbi, thank you. I was thinking, 73 slides, how are we going to get through this? But we got through it, and you've shared some incredible information with us, and you know, some very personal, touching stories. That story about the Brazilian millionaire always gets me. I think it's really, really quite poignant. Pragnabin, I think you know, you were worried about today, and you know, you and I have spoken on this same stage at Diwali last year. That story, current story, is incredible and a very, very courageous story. So thank you for sharing that with us and for inspiring so many people. And I thank Karan for inspiring a whole new generation of people to become organ donors. I thank our team who are behind the curtain there, making everything work. So Nikunj Bhai and Bhavini Ben, thank you so much for this. Of course, my thanks to Oshwal Association of the UK for hosting these webinars. And we had said that we will be doing these on very challenging and difficult subjects, and that's of course what we're going to do. Our next event is about another quite difficult, quite challenging, and actually a subject matter that often mystifies a lot of people. So we are going to be discussing dementia on the 8th of April. And joining us for that will be Dr. Sami Shah, a consultant for older adults at NHS East London, and our wonderful sister Shelby Simon, who works with and cares for the elderly. And so they will be sharing information about dementia with us. And we do have a wonderful poignant story as well from a young person who has been on a journey living with her grandmother who has dementia. So she's going to be talking about what that's been like, and you know, what do we do practically to live with somebody with dementia. Thank you everyone very, very much for today, and I look forward to the next one. Last but not least, my thanks to Jyoti Ben for facilitating the Q&A again and keeping us all to time. So thank you very much. Thanks everyone for joining. Jai Jinendra.